Today, we're going to dive into a pretty mythic story of transformation. It's all about a character who was forged in total darkness, who learned to master it, was then broken by it, and after 10,000 years of isolation, has come back a completely changed being. This is the story of Lionel Jonson.
Wow. I mean, that one sentence tells you everything you need to know about the stakes here, doesn't it? This isn't your typical hero's journey. This is about someone who survived by becoming even more terrifying than the horrors scratching at his door. It just perfectly sets the stage for a life defined by brutal, brutal necessity. So to really get the lion, you first have to understand where he came from, because his homeworld wasn't just someplace on a map. It was a psychological boot camp.
Okay, so try to picture this world. It's almost entirely covered in a dark, predatory forest. A place just teeming with these awful, chaos-twisted monsters. And humanity? They're just clinging to survival inside these giant fortified monasteries. That was Caliban. Life there was just one long, grinding war against the darkness right outside the walls. And this is where we see the direct link between the physical world and his mindset. Living on Caliban basically hard-coded a certain way of thinking into him. You know, if threats are literally lurking behind every tree, you learn to assume threats are everywhere, all the time. If stepping into the open gets you killed by a monster, you learn pretty quick that revealing your intentions to anyone is a fatal mistake. The real forest created a mental one.
And here's the wild part. The lion's strategy wasn't to escape this horrible system. It was to win it. He survived by becoming the ultimate predator, a being so cunning, so dangerous, that the monsters in the dark actually learned to be afraid of him. This was survival through just absolute total dominance.
But you have to ask, what's the cost of that kind of mastery? What happens when you take a psychology forged in a death world forest and you try to apply it to a galaxy of potential allies, brothers, and complex politics? Well, you win, but you also lose. Big time.
This really breaks down his personal rulebook. For the lion, everything, and I mean everything, was a threat assessment. He kept absolute secrets, not because he was malicious, but because that's how you stayed alive. He was ruthless and pragmatic because hesitation on Caliban meant you were dead. And maybe most important of all, he operated from this place of deep, fundamental isolation. Because in those woods, you could only ever really rely on yourself.
And this is the absolute tragedy of the lion. His paranoia, the very tool that kept him alive, was also a prison wall. It cut him off from any kind of genuine connection. He was so busy watching for the enemy on the outside that he could never build trust on the inside. He won the game of survival, all right, but it cost him the very relationships that could have saved him from his own downfall. With that kind of psychology, a catastrophe was pretty much inevitable. So while the lion is out there, using his hunter's cunning to conquer the galaxy, the one place he thought was secure, his home, under the watch of his closest friend, Luther, it was rotting from within. The greatest threat wasn't some monster in the dark. It was his own brother. His entire psychological system completely failed because it just had no way to account for a threat that was already inside the house. So after this catastrophic failure, after his world is literally blown apart, the lion vanishes for 10,000 years. But we can reframe this. This wasn't just a defeat. You could see it as a profound period of isolation, a strategic withdrawal from a game he had well and truly lost. So that's the big question, isn't it? Was his disappearance just the result of his wounds, basically a 10,000-year-long coma? Or was it something more? A deliberate choice to just step off the board entirely, to enter a state of deep, deep reflection. This interpretation is so much more interesting. It suggests his long sleep wasn't passive. It was an active process. Imagine it, 10,000 years to process the ultimate failure. 10,000 years to finally face the parts of himself, his shadow, that he had only ever tried to dominate. It was a conscious choice to just stop playing the game of paranoia and secrecy that had cost him absolutely everything. And get this, he wasn't entirely alone. These mysterious beings from Caliban's own forests, the Watchers in the Dark, they protected him. And this just perfectly illustrates a brand new lesson. The darkness isn't all one thing. It doesn't just hold predators, it can also hold allies, something his old mindset could never ever have accepted. His isolation was literally guarded by the very thing he once sought to destroy.
So when he finally returns after all that time, he is not the same man who fell. That long, deep isolation wasn't an end. It was a crucible. And he emerges completely transformed.
The comparison is just stark. The old lion was all about absolute secrecy. The new one practices chosen revelation. He's moved from being cold and distant to actually expressing regret and vulnerability. He's no longer just an apex predator. He's a leader who's actively seeking genuine connection. The core skills are still there, but his motivation, how he uses them, it's all fundamentally changed. And this is the key. He didn't erase his past. He integrated it. That paranoid, ruthless hunter is still part of him, for sure, but it's no longer his entire identity. It's now a tool in his arsenal that he can pick up or put down whenever he chooses, instead of being compulsively driven by it. He's in control. So in this last part, let's pull it all together. What can this incredible journey of isolation and return actually teach us? How does the dark forest of our own past become the garden of our future? This table is a perfect summary. He learned that just mastering your environment isn't enough. He learned that the real threat is the internal one. He shows us that a strategic withdrawal, a period of isolation, can sometimes be the wisest move you can make. And most importantly, his return proves that you can endure unimaginable failure and isolation and come back fundamentally changed for the better. You know, what's really powerful about this story is how it feels like a template. If you've ever felt like you had to adapt to a hostile environment, or that paranoia was a necessary tool for survival, if you've been betrayed by those closest to you and just felt the need to withdraw from the world, this story is telling you that you're not broken, you're adapted, and that adaptation doesn't have to be your final form. And so we end here. The lion's journey shows that the very psychology born from a dark forest, the trauma, the survival skills, the isolation, all of it can be transformed. The source of our wounds can actually become the foundation of our wisdom. The forest can become a garden. The only question is whether we, like him, will learn how to tend it.